Hi, I'm Dr. Marianne Cintron, founder of Step-by-Step Dyslexia Solutions. We're a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. And I have these interviews to reach an audience of dyslexic adults or adults who have dyslexic children. So who I have as my guests are dyslexic adults as well, or adults with dyslexic children. And sometimes I just talk from my heart. So when I meet these brilliant dyslexic adults, it really intrigues me that I want to have them on the podcast because I want you to be encouraged in your journey with dyslexia or your child's dyslexia. And I want you to know you're not alone. So the guest I have today is Matthew Head, and he's from England. And he is the designer of what's called Life Hacks, and he's going to tell you about that. And what really intrigues me is as I'm learning about the 4 areas where dyslexic people excel, one is in architecture, one's in engineering, one's in the arts, and one's as an entrepreneur. So Matthew excels in the engineering field, and I thought you would really enjoy hearing from him. So greet Matthew with me as we invite you, Matthew, to come to the stage here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, Matthew. Would you tell the audience a little bit about you before we start asking you questions?
Yeah, sure. I'm, what am I now, 36 years old. I have spent a long time doing a long route to becoming what I am now, which is a senior design engineer. I work for a small company in the UK that design high performance cars. Some brands they work with are like Lotus, Aston Martin, Lamborghini, and people of that ilk. So I do quite a lot of work with very expensive £1 million cars that I get to design bits for, which is kind of fun when you watch them go around racetracks.
That's very exciting. Now, is it true you started as an auto mechanic?
I did, yes. So, yeah, I say going to school in the 90s, got picked up with dyslexia at about 6 years old. So I've been sort of staying with dyslexia since I can remember, to be honest. And by the time I got round to the end of my schooling, and I went to, in the UK we call it college, but I guess it'd be high school in the States. I was completely done with it by then. A lot of emotional baggage about what being dyslexic was like, done with education. I'd done enough to become a mechanic. So there I was in a pair of overalls, and I worked on lorries for most of my early 20s. And it was only by the time I got to my mid-20s that I kind of thought, I want to do more than this. Like, I've got people working sort of with me and apprentices I'm training, and I'm telling them how the engine works, and I can visualize how you go around it and explain everything that's going on. So I started looking for jobs that would pique my interest more than sort of change oil and all that kind of stuff. And realized there's all these jobs out there that are great, but they want you to have an engineering degree. So I ended up quitting work and going to university to study a master's degree in mechanical and electrical engineering, which, being a person who thought, A, they were a bit silly, B, can't spell, here I am with the academics, all the smart people, sat in their room in a classroom wondering why I'd made such a big mistake. So I spent the first kind of 6 months of university learning how to learn again, and then spent the next 4 years proving myself wrong in terms of, yes, I can do it. And here I am now in, rather than fixing the lorries and cars, I actually design the parts for these cars, and quite high-end cars at that.
Well, you're the envy of a lot of people out there. Especially, I know my son loves cars and my son-in-law loves cars, and we're familiar with the Haas Raceway.
Yes, yeah.
So, it's really interesting. What helped you get through college? How did you figure it out?
Do you know what? I would have left my schooling in the sort of like 2003, early 2000s. And then when I decided to go back to university, I sort of ticked the box on one of the forms that said I was dyslexic, and you have to then have an educational psychologist assessment.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, well, I'd already had one as a 6-year-old, but I don't remember it, because then as a 25-year-old, you suddenly hit this thing and and then they arm you with a laptop with like Dragon Naturally Speaking and all that kind of software in. It surprised me, the change in understanding. It went from being a very paperwork thing, like I as I've gone through my university career and into my 30s, and now like 6 years post university, I now almost enjoy writing and keeping notes, and I realize the importance of it and kind of now read for pleasure. I've discovered extra dyslexia programs in terms of helping that out and suiting the way my brain learns. But yeah, actually having all the extra support, and as you quite rightly said in your interview, being a STEM subject as an engineering, you suddenly realize that there's all these dyslexic people surrounded with you, and you're like, oh, well, they're like 17 and they get on with it, and they have scribes in the exam, where I had a lot of emotional baggage with sort of almost hiding the fact I was dyslexic.
Yeah.
The sort of me before 25 would have never dreamt that me at 36 would be on podcasts that go around the world talking to people about being dyslexic. I'd have, why are your text messages
Wonderful.
rubbish? So there's a lot of, it's a hack I need to get on the website, is letting go of self-limiting belief, believing things about yourself that aren't true. And then when you start proving and testing them, they fall apart. And then it opens doorways to other things.
I think that's beautiful. Gosh, so many thoughts come to my mind when I think about that. When I learned about 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic.
Yep.
35% in the United States of the entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And what really touches my heart is I believe the dyslexic genius is hidden because of low self-esteem.
Yes.
And they,
yes.
The kids don't, maybe someone doesn't know how to pull it out of them. And if they're not getting that reading intervention, they're moving from one low reading group to the lower reading group to the lowest reading group. And feeling
I
like,
remember,
like
sorry, I remember
really
being
bad.
Yeah, I remember being at school and being in one of the top sets of my science and doing really well on the class tests, being 1 or 2. Me and this girl, I can never remember her name now, we used to swap between who got the highest score, and then going straight into the lower set of English, where you either had the people like myself who struggled with it or people who just weren't interested in schooling. And it's this really weird juxtaposition, which does give you a load of self-esteem issues. And I meant the gifted dyslexia and the power of it, and particularly being a designer, being able to visualize how things are supposed to work before you've even got them into a computer, it really helps.
Well, and I've heard dyslexic people say that they think their dyslexia is a superpower.
Yes.
So I just created a t-shirt, and I said, dyslexia is a trait of genius.
Brilliant.
I think more people will acknowledge that they have it when they realize it is a special giftedness. And if your genius has been unlocked and it's exposed, that you can share your victory with people now instead of being embarrassed by it.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's, rather than being, I suppose, neurotypical, you kind of have, you're uprated in certain areas and maybe downrated, and it all balances out because everything does in the world. But actually, once you stumble on the places that you're really, really good at, you are really off with it. And it really surprised me. And actually then having other programs like the program you run, helping you bring up the areas that you thought you were weak at, but actually I've discovered it's the school system. They teach in one way and you're just outside of that box. So it's not actually that you can't learn English language, you've just never been given the right tools to learn it.
Well, and one of the things I share is that dyslexic kids are not meant to fit in, they're meant to stand out. And and I share how I've heard others teach this, and I've done the research on it, and it's true that we were created to learn apprentice style, modeling and hands-on. And with the Industrial Revolution came the printing press, and suddenly we lost that 20% of our population who are dyslexic, because now the standard was, can you read or not? And it wasn't just, God created our brains, and dyslexic brains are just, designers. And I think of Albert Einstein, Henry Ford, Leonardo da Vinci, all these creative designers, and they're not going to let the printing press limit their creativity. So I have a whole new way of looking at this now. Last year I was developing my reading program, and we have the music gap, and I'm reaching the schools and the administrators. But now I want to come to parents, because I know that when their kids can read, their homes can be peaceful. And I even had I had
Yeah.
a grandparent tell me that as he was raising his granddaughter, because the mom was in prison, that their home used to be a battlefield. And now that she was making 3-year gains in only 30 sessions of our intervention, he said she gets along with the family, she's doing her schoolwork, and she enjoys learning. So isn't that so important that we help kids not only read well, write good paragraphs, but move to the front of their class in reading and enjoy learning, enjoy school.
I completely agree. And like same as work, isn't it? You spend more time at work or at school than you do with your family in terms if you delete the hours that you're asleep. So the waking
Right.
hours, 40 hours a week, that's quite a lot of time in one place. And if you're like myself at school, feeling quite low about it, then depending on what type of personality the child is, it can bring out the rebellious side, or in my case, it's kind of, okay.
Were you a
we
kid
just
that got in trouble a lot?
Not really, no. I was sort of fairly middle of the road, I suppose. It just kind of, I sort of work hard. And I realize now in hindsight that as much as it was not fun back then, it has instilled a sort of level of grit. I think there's that, as an adult, it's turned into drive, grit, and determination. As a kid, I was kind of a bit nervous and timid. And there's still a few things now. If I do something that I'm not that great at, that kind of old habit sneaks in occasionally. But once you find things you are at, it's that sort of drive that just keeps pushing you relentlessly forwards, and
Well, then we
giving
all
up.
need a little bit of that grit also, right? I went back into education after raising my kids, and I was
Yes.
one of those teachers that never got tenure because I got my credentials and masters fast. And I thought that would help me be a better teacher. All along, as it
Mm.
was, I was on the higher end of the pay scale. So I never got that tenure, but as God put me in a role to be an entrepreneur, I was remembering my mom saying an entrepreneur is an unemployed person. So it had a negative connotation because my dad
Yes.
was an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, always
Mm.
losing his jobs as he was sick with diabetes. But I realized I'm really an entrepreneur. I love talking to people. I love creating. And it's neat that it's linked to education. And I really have a passion to help kids who can't read, help the
Mm.
dyslexic kids. You want to talk about your the life hacks?
Yes. So it's kind of, I got made redundant last year. I was designing motorcycles for Triumph, and in the sort of few months between the two jobs, I did one of the things I've had on my to-do list for a very long time, and that was working in the STEM industry and having a lot of dyslexic people. You bump into each other and swap kind of notes, so to speak.
Isn't that cool?
So I've created a website called Dyslexia Life Hacks, which is at dyslexialifehacks.com, and it's currently got 21 hacks on it. And it's just little tips and tricks in terms of ways to get around some of the sort of, should we say, the downside of being dyslexic. So one example, one of my favorite hacks is I've got one called Hey Google. So have you ever got to that point where you're trying to spell a word and you just can't get it right, and the spell checker puts the red lines underneath it, and you use the synonym checker and all that kind of stuff, and you just can't get it in? So say the example I've got on the website is using the word rises, and you try multiple ways, can't get it to work. So you're like, okay, well, I know there's a movie called The Dark Knight Rises. If I write The Dark Knight, then my misspelling of rises, Google will bring up the movie, and then I can copy and paste the word rises into my text. So that's one example of hacks. And it's also a good excuse to look for Batman at work,
Super.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Is just I said to one of my friends once when they were doing it, and they're like, I didn't know you could. That's really clever. I didn't know you could do that. And there's one like Microsoft Word synonym checker, where you right click and it says synonyms. So if you put the right homophone in, like there, like, damn it, that one doesn't work. Oh, I know it's right. But if you're completely unaware that this thing even exists on Word, it's a tool that is there on the kit when you're writing an email that you're just not using. So the website is full of little hacks like that, links to blog posts about sort of book reviews that I've done, or there's one about upgrading Word spell checker if you're writing a CV. It was a blog post I found, and it just really, I'm hoping it will grow into a signpost so people can come in. The hacks are short and sweet, because one thing I found when I was researching the website was some websites have put stuff about dyslexia help, and it's this big, huge block of text. Well, being a dyslexic person, I'm like, well, I don't want to read that. So
Yes.
it's that, and there is opportunity for you to submit your own hacks, which will be to myself because I'm the only person running the website. So I'm hoping it will eventually grow into a bit more of a community share thing, and we can just signpost lots of hacks on it, little places and points to little signposts people can find out just for little things that they can help day to
Things
day
that
with.
work for them. And,
Yeah.
I do the same thing. If I just don't spell a word a lot of times, I'm not sure if it's correct spelling, I'll try to think of a movie that has that word in
Yes.
it, and it'll tell you how to spell it. So even people who don't have dyslexia can use that trick. I
They
met
can, yes.
So I met Matthew through, I believe it was my Dyslexia Solutions group. That's on
Yes.
Facebook. And he always wanted to post all this real interesting stuff. And I love it because he's not just selling a product, he's selling he's just posting ideas to let people know how they can be successful. And I just really admired that. So I'm glad you're my new friend on Facebook.
That's okay.
We're going to wrap it up, or there's what final words that you share with the audience before we go? And
final words? Sorry, say again.
And let them know how they can reach you again.
Okay, so I think final words is, remember, if you're a dyslexic person, that if you are struggling, you just haven't quite found the right way to teach yourself, particularly the English language, and have a look at all the famous dyslexic people. It actually is a superpower once you tap into the right buttons. You just got to put the right cheat code in if you're into gaming, and then you're well away, and sometimes even ahead of your peers. And remember, that will eventually happen. And there's loads of people like myself who can prove that that does happen. And then, where you can find me, if you go onto my website, dyslexialifehacks.com, all the information, and click contact if you want to drop an email or have a look through the website hacks. There's quite a lot of links in there and lots of content to have a look at.
And because you have a slight accent, I'm just going to repeat. It's Dyslexia Life Hacks.com.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Okay, Matthew, it's been wonderful having you on, and we'll have to have you on at a later time for a little bit more information.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank the audience for being with us. And if what we have shared has inspired you, please visit our website at dyslexia-solutions.com and consider joining us. Make a donation if you'd like. And we'd like you to follow me on Instagram at Marianne Cintron with Marianne Cintron. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
and we'll
you.
talk to you later, Matthew. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.